Commander Thalok stood on the observation deck of the Veritas Prime Military Academy, watching the new recruits file into the training grounds below. His scaled hands rested behind his back, a posture he had maintained for 300 years of service to the Galactic Coalition. He had trained warriors from 47 different species. He knew combat in all its forms. Today the humans were arriving. Thalok had read the reports. Earth had joined the Coalition 2 years ago after their first contact with galactic civilization. The humans were excited to contribute to the defense forces. They sent their best soldiers, their brightest officers. Thalok was curious to see what they could offer. The first human stepped onto the training ground. She was small, barely reaching the chest height of the average Vex warrior. Her skin was pale, her hair dark and tied back. She moved with careful precision, her eyes scanning the facility. Behind her came more humans, all similarly sized. None of them looked particularly impressive. "That is Cadet G1, said General Krell, the four-armed insectoid who ran the academy. She scored highest in the human selection trials. Thalok studied the young woman. She looked fragile. Her bones were thin, her muscles compact. What are her physical scores? Krell consulted his datapad. Strength rating 42% of galactic average. Speed 38%. Endurance testing incomplete. Durability estimated 30%. 30%? Thalok repeated. She would break in a standard combat scenario. Most likely, Krell agreed. But the humans insisted on sending soldiers. We cannot refuse them without causing diplomatic issues. Another human joined G1 on the field. This one was male, slightly taller, with broader shoulders. He smiled at something G1 said. They seemed relaxed, almost casual. Thalok found this strange. Most new recruits were nervous on their first day. That is Cadet Minho, Krell said. Second highest scores. Similar physical ratings, the orientation began. Thalok watched as the humans were grouped with cadets from other species. A massive Thorian, 3 times human size, stood next to Minho. The comparison was almost comedic. The Thorian's arm was thicker than Minho's entire torso. During the first combat drill, Thalok saw what he expected. The humans were slow compared to the Velk scouts. They were weak compared to the Thorian warriors. They lacked the armored skin of the Kreeth, the claws of the Fendari, the psychic abilities of the Mentari. They were average in every measurable way. G1 faced a Kreeth cadet in a training match. The Kreeth's natural armor could stop most weapons. G1 circled carefully, looking for weak points. She struck twice, both hits ineffective. The Kreeth knocked her down with a casual swipe. She rolled, stood up, and returned to position. Thalok made notes on his datapad. Human cadet demonstrates adequate tactical awareness but lacks the physical capability to execute effectively. The matches continued. Minho fought a Fendari, losing quickly when the clawed warrior simply overpowered him. Another human cadet, Hunsik, barely lasted 30 seconds against a Velk's superior speed. By the end of the day, the humans had lost every single combat drill. Thalok returned to his office and began writing his report. He had done this for every new species that joined the Coalition. It was his duty to assess their combat potential and recommend appropriate roles. Humanity. Initial assessment, he titled the document. He wrote carefully, documenting everything he had observed. The humans had no exceptional physical traits. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. Their tactics were straightforward, copied from military manuals they had brought from Earth. They showed no special abilities, no hidden advantages. Recommendation, he typed, assign human personnel to support roles. Logistics, technical services, medical support. They lacked the necessary attributes for frontline combat operations. He sent the report to Coalition Command and filed it in the Academy's database, another species categorized, another assessment complete. Thalok felt satisfied with his thorough analysis. 3 days later, he was supervising advanced combat simulations. The simulation placed mixed species teams in hostile scenarios. They had to work together to complete objectives while under fire from automated defense systems. G1's team was assigned a difficult scenario, breach a fortified position while under heavy fire. Her team included 2 Kreeth, a Thorian, and Minho. The Kreeth were natural assault troops. The Thorian was their heavy weapons specialist. The humans were there. Thalok expected the Kreeth to lead the assault. Instead, G1 studied the simulation map for several minutes. She pointed to a position and spoke quietly to her team. The others nodded. The simulation began. Defensive fire filled the training space with hard light projections. The Kreeth charged forward as expected. But Jiwon and Minho moved differently. They went around, taking a longer route that exposed them to more fire. The simulation marked them as hit multiple times. In real combat, they would be dead. But they reached their position. From there, they provided covering fire that allowed the Thorian to advance. The team completed the objective, barely passing the minimum requirements. Inefficient, Thalox muttered. The humans took unnecessary risks and suffered casualties that could have been avoided. But they had passed. Barely, but they passed. The days turned into weeks. The humans continued training. They lost most of their combat matches. They scored lower than other species in physical tests. They were, by every metric Thalox had, below average, yet they never complained. Jiwon returned from each defeat with the same calm expression. Minho smiled and joked with his teammates even after losing badly. When the other cadets went to rest, the humans often stayed late, practicing more. One evening, Thalox was walking past the training hall when he heard movement inside. He looked through the window and saw Jiwon and 3 other humans running combat drills. They had been training for 14 hours already. They should have been exhausted. Jiwon's face was covered in sweat. Her movements were slower than in the morning. But she continued, repeating the same drill over and over. When she finally stopped, she bent over, breathing hard. Then she straightened and said something to the others. They all laughed. Thalox found this curious but not particularly meaningful. Hard work was admirable, but it could not overcome physical limitations. The next day, during a lecture on combat tactics, Thalox overheard 2 instructors talking near the door. "Did you see the human scores?" one asked. "Pathetic," the other replied. "I don't understand why Command accepted them. They can barely keep up. Give them logistics duties and keep them away from real combat. They would just get killed." Both instructors laughed. Thalox glanced at the human cadets in the room. Jiwon sat in the 3rd row. Her face showed no reaction, but her eyes were focused straight ahead. She had definitely heard. Minho sat beside her. He leaned close and whispered something. Jiwon nodded once, her expression unchanged. After class, Thalox returned to his office. He reviewed his report on humanity once more. Everything in it was accurate. The humans were physically inferior. They had no special abilities. They would be suitable for support roles only. He filed the report as final and closed the document. The assessment was complete. He understood the humans perfectly well. They were brave enough to try, he would give them that. But bravery alone did not win battles. Thalox had trained warriors for 3 centuries. He knew combat in all its forms. The humans would serve the coalition well in their own way behind the lines, where their limitations would not get them killed. He was completely certain of this. He had no idea how wrong he was. 6 months had passed since Thalox filed his report on humanity. The humans had graduated from basic training and received their assignments. Most went to logistics and support units exactly as he had recommended. A few, including Jiwon and Minho, were assigned to combat units as junior officers. Thalox thought this was a mistake, but Command had made their decision. Now Thalox stood on the bridge of the carrier Steadfast, watching tactical displays with growing concern. The Draken swarm had attacked 3 human colony worlds near the border. The coalition had responded with a full battle group. Thalox commanded the ground forces, a mixed battalion of various species. Lieutenant Jiwon was assigned to his command staff. She stood at a secondary console, monitoring troop positions. She had barely spoken since coming aboard. Thalox preferred it that way. He had a battle to plan. The Draken swarm was a new threat. They appeared 6 months ago, attacking shipping lanes and remote stations. They used numbers rather than tactics, throwing endless waves of fighters at their targets. So far, no one had found their homeworld. "We will establish defensive positions around the primary colony," Thalox explained to his officers. "The Draken will come to us. We will use our superior firepower and discipline to defeat them." It was a solid plan. Thalox had used similar strategies dozens of times. The officers nodded and moved to prepare their units. Jiwon raised her hand slightly. "Commander, permission to speak?" "Granted. The Draken use suicide attacks. Our defensive positions might not hold if they commit fully." Thalox's scales rippled with annoyance. "Our positions are mathematically calculated. The Draken are not sophisticated enough to break them." "Yes, sir. Jiwan lowered her hand and said nothing more. The battalion landed on the colony world 3 hours later. Thalox positioned his forces across a wide front, establishing overlapping fields of fire. The Kreeth held the center, their armored bodies perfect for absorbing attacks. The Fendari covered the flanks with their speed. Support units stayed behind the lines. The human contingent, about 40 soldiers led by Sergeant Minho, was placed in a secondary position. They would provide backup if needed. Thalox did not expect to need them. The Draken arrived at dawn. Their ships filled the sky, small craft designed for atmospheric combat. Thalox had never seen so many enemy vessels in one place. His tactical display showed hundreds of contacts, then thousands. All units hold positions, he commanded. Fire on my mark. The Draken dove toward the Coalition lines. Coalition weapons opened fire, and the sky filled with explosions. Dozens of Draken craft disintegrated, but more kept coming. They crashed into the defensive positions, detonating themselves. The Kreeth line held, barely. Then the second wave arrived, and the third. For 6 hours, the Draken threw themselves at the Coalition forces without pause. Thalox's carefully calculated positions began to fail. The Kreeth were exhausted from constant impacts. The Fendari could not maintain their speed indefinitely. Gaps appeared in the defensive line. Rotate units, Thalox ordered. Fresh troops to the front, but there were no fresh troops. Everyone was already committed. Thalox felt something he had not felt in a century. Uncertainty. Commander, Jiwan's voice came through his comm.
Human units requesting permission to advance. Denied.
Hold your position. Sir, the eastern flank is collapsing. We can reinforce it. Thalox checked his display. She was right. The eastern position was about to break. If the Draken got through there, they would flank the entire battalion. Permission granted, but do not overextend. Understood. The human units moved forward. Thalox watched them on his display, expecting them to establish a new defensive position. Instead, they kept going, moving into the gap where the Draken were pouring through. What are they doing? Thalox demanded. That position is untenable. He switched his view to the combat feed from the eastern flank. What he saw made no sense. The humans had formed a tight formation in the middle of the Draken advance. They were surrounded, taking fire from all directions. A Kreeth unit would have broken under such pressure. The Fendari would have retreated. But the humans held. Minho stood in the center directing fire. A Draken fighter crashed next to him, close enough that the explosion should have killed him. He stumbled but kept fighting. Another human, Private Hyunsik, took a direct hit that knocked him down. The combat feed showed him crawling to a damaged shield generator, working on it while unable to stand. Thalox realized what they were doing. They had turned themselves into an obstacle. The Draken were so focused on destroying the human position that they had stopped advancing. The human units were buying time with their own bodies. Recall them immediately, Thalox said. Sir, they are not responding to recall orders, an officer reported. Override their communications. Already tried. Lieutenant Jiwan acknowledged the order but says they cannot withdraw while the position remains threatened. For 14 hours, the humans held that impossible position. Thalox sent medical supplies, ammunition, and reinforcements. None of it mattered. The humans refused to move. They fought without rotation, without rest, without any of the standard military procedures that kept soldiers alive. Captain Salmon, the human medical officer, worked on wounded soldiers under constant fire. Thalox watched her perform surgery with one hand while holding a weapon in the other. When Draken fighters strafed her position, she covered her patients with her own body and continued working. The Draken assault finally broke at sunset. They had exhausted their forces against the Coalition defense. As the last enemy ships retreated, Thalox received casualty reports. The human units had suffered 40% casualties. Hyunsik had died at his post, having repaired the shield generator 3 times before his body finally gave out. 12 other humans were dead. 20 more were injured, but they had not broken. Not one human had retreated. Not one had failed to follow orders. Thalox went to the medical station where the wounded were being treated. He found Minho sitting on a bed, his arm in a regeneration sleeve. The sergeant was dictating a report, his voice steady despite his injuries. Sergeant, Thalox said, your unit performed adequately. Minho looked up. His face was covered in bruises and burns. Thank you, sir. Why did you not withdraw when ordered? The position needed to be held. At the cost of half your unit? Mignot was quiet for a moment. The cost would have been higher if we had left. We made the choice that saved the most lives. Thalox did not understand this logic. No position was worth 40% casualties. Any reasonable commander would have withdrawn and found another solution. But the humans had not. He found Jiwan at the command center, still at her console. She had not left her post in over 20 hours. Lieutenant, you should rest. Soon, sir. I am finishing my reports. Your unit's performance was unexpected. Jiwan's fingers paused over her console. She looked at Thalox with those strange human eyes. We did what was necessary. You took extreme casualties, yes, sir. Was it worth it? We are still here. The colonists are still alive, so yes, it was worth it. Thalox returned to his quarters that night and opened his report on humanity. He read through his assessment again. Everything he had written was accurate. The humans had no exceptional physical traits. They had no special abilities, yet they had held an impossible position through sheer determination. They had suffered casualties that would have broken any other unit, and they had not even considered retreating. Thalox added a note to his report. Human units demonstrate unusual tolerance for casualties. Further observation required. He filed the update and tried to sleep, but he could not stop thinking about what he had seen. The humans fighting with broken bodies, Hyunsik crawling to repair equipment while dying, Soman performing surgery while under fire. It was not courage. Courage was facing danger despite fear. This was something else. The humans had fought past the point where courage mattered. They had fought past the point where victory seemed possible. They had simply refused to stop. Thalox had studied warfare for 3 centuries. He knew every tactic, every strategy, but he had never seen anything like this. He began to wonder if his understanding of combat was not as complete as he had believed. 3 months after the border conflict, Captain Jiwan commanded a human rapid response unit aboard Coalition Station Outreach 7. The station was a major supply hub, home to 15,000 personnel from dozens of species. Thalox had been assigned as the station's defense coordinator, a position he took seriously. He had spent those 3 months reviewing combat footage from the human units. He watched their actions frame by frame, trying to understand what he had witnessed. The humans fought differently than any species he had studied. They ignored standard military doctrine about acceptable casualties. They did not retreat when logic dictated they should. Thalox could not explain it, so he decided to observe them more closely. Jiwan's unit consisted of 30 soldiers. They ran regular drills and maintained station security. Thalox watched them during training. They were still physically average compared to other species, but they trained with an intensity that seemed excessive. Where other units drilled for 2 hours, the humans drilled for 6. Where others took breaks, the humans continued. Lieutenant Minho served as Jiwan's second in command. His arm had healed completely, leaving no sign of his previous injury. He smiled often and seemed relaxed, but Thalox noticed how his eyes constantly scanned for threats. The casualness was a mask. Underneath, the human was always alert. Corporal Dayun was the unit's combat engineer. She was small, even for a human, and looked too young to be a soldier, but Thalox had reviewed her service record. She had repaired critical equipment under fire 7 times during the border conflict. Her efficiency rating was higher than most Kreeth engineers, despite having less experience. The station's routine continued peacefully for weeks. Then on a quiet morning shift, alarms began screaming throughout Outreach 7. Thalox reached the command center within seconds. The displays showed a nightmare scenario. Draken swarm vessels were emerging from multiple jump points around the station. Not a raiding party. A full fleet. Contact count? He demanded. 240 vessels and rising, an officer reported. They are launching boarding craft. Admiral Vexthar's voice came through the communication system. All stations, this is Coalition Command. Draken Swarm has launched a coordinated attack on multiple installations. Fleet reinforcements are 3 days away. Begin immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel. 3 days. The station could not hold for 3 hours against this force, let alone 3 days. Start the evacuation, Thalox ordered. Priority to civilians and support staff. Combat units will maintain defensive positions as long as possible. The evacuation began immediately. Transport ships docked and loaded passengers as quickly as possible. Thalox coordinated the defense, trying to buy time for the evacuation. But the Draken were everywhere. They breached the outer hull in a dozen locations. Station defense forces fought desperately to contain them. After 6 hours, Thalox faced the terrible truth. They could not evacuate everyone in time. Thousands would be left behind if the defense collapsed. All remaining combat units prepare to fall back to the final evacuation point, he ordered. We will hold there until the last transport departs. Commander, this is Captain Jiwan. Thalox pulled up her communication channel. Captain, move your unit to evacuation sector 4. You will be on the last transport. Sir, we request permission to stay. Denied. Human units will evacuate with the others. Commander, with respect, we volunteer to hold the defense line. Pull back the other units. We will buy you the time you need. Thalox felt his scales tighten with anger. Captain, you are ordering me to abandon you here. We are volunteering to stay, sir. The other units have families waiting at home. We know what we are doing. You cannot hold this station for 3 days against that fleet. We don't need to hold it for 3 days, sir. We just need to hold it long enough. Thalox wanted to refuse, but he looked at the evacuation numbers. If the human unit held the defense line alone, he could pull back 200 other soldiers. Those soldiers could help with the evacuation. More people would survive. It was the correct tactical decision. It was also the most horrible decision he had ever made. Permission granted. All non-human combat units fall back to evacuation sectors. Human forces will maintain the defense line. Over the next hours, Thalox watched from the command center as the humans dispersed throughout the station, 30 soldiers against thousands of Draken. The mathematics were impossible, but the humans fought anyway. Jiwan established defensive choke points at critical junctions. Her soldiers held positions that should have fallen in minutes. They lasted hours. When the Draken broke through one position, the humans fell back to another, fighting every meter of the way. Diane moved throughout the station, repairing damaged systems. A power conduit exploded under Draken fire. She repaired it. They destroyed it again. She repaired it again. 7 times the same conduit was destroyed. 7 times Dion crawled through fire and debris to fix it. The 7th time shrapnel tore through her side. She kept working, leaving a trail of blood behind her. Minho held a critical corridor with 5 soldiers. Draken forces hit them in waves. For 31 hours, they did not move from that position. When their ammunition ran out, they used improvised weapons. Minho fought with a piece of broken pipe when his weapon failed. Thalox watched in disbelief as the human officer, armed with scrap metal, held off armored Draken warriors. The evacuation continued. Transport after transport departed. The human defense line kept shrinking, but it never broke. On the 2nd day, Thalox watched a human soldier take a direct hit that the medical sensors said was fatal. The soldier, a young woman named Yuna, stopped moving. Her vitals flatlined. She was dead. Then, 2 minutes later, the medic shocked her heart. Yuna gasped and started breathing again. An hour later, Thalox saw her back at her post, holding a defensive position. That is not possible, he said aloud. But it had happened. The human had died and returned to fight. As the 72nd hour approached, only 12 humans remained combat effective. They had pulled back to a single corridor near the main evacuation bay. The Draken were closing in from 3 directions. The last transport was loading. Human units, final transport is departing in 10 minutes, Thalox transmitted. Fall back now. That is a direct order. Negative, Commander, Jiwan replied. Her voice was hoarse from shouting orders. The corridor is not secure. If we fall back, the Draken will reach the transport before it can depart. Captain, you have fulfilled your duty. Your entire unit will be killed if you stay. We know, sir. Tell the transport to go as soon as it is loaded. Do not wait for us, Thalox felt something break inside him. These humans had fought for 3 days without sleep, without relief, watching their unit die around them. And they would not leave until everyone else was safe. Captain, why? There was a pause. Then Jiwan responded, her voice quiet. Because someone has to, sir. And we can. The final transport departed 8 minutes later. Coalition fleet reinforcements arrived 5 hours after that, driving off the remaining Draken vessels. They found the station heavily damaged but still intact. Thousands had been saved by the evacuation. They found 11 dead humans in the last corridor. They found Jiwan alive, barely, buried under rubble. She had stayed at her post until her body simply could not continue. Even then, she had not retreated. Thalox went to the medical bay where Jiwan was recovering. She was unconscious, her body broken in multiple places. The doctor said she would survive but needed months of recovery. He stood next to her bed for a long time trying to understand. The humans were not stronger. They were not faster. They had no special powers. But they had held an entire station against impossible odds through nothing but raw determination. Thalox returned to his office and pulled up his report on humanity. He read it again, all his careful observations and assessments. Then he deleted the entire file. He started a new report. His hands shook as he typed the first line. I thought I understood combat. I was wrong. 1 year after first contact with humanity, the Galactic Coalition launched Operation Final Strike. Intelligence had located the Draken Swarm's homeworld. Coalition Command decided to end the war with one massive offensive. Every available ship and soldier was committed to the assault. Colonel G1 commanded the 1st Human Shock Battalion. She had recovered from her injuries at Outreach 7, though the doctors said she should have died from them. Thalox was not surprised. He had learned that humans did not follow normal rules about what should kill them. Thalox served as strategic advisor to the human forces. Coalition Command had insisted. They wanted his expertise combined with the humans' unusual combat effectiveness. He agreed because he wanted to understand. After a year of studying humanity, he still could not fully explain what made them different. Major Minho led the battalion's combat operations. His face had more scars now, lines that made him look older than his actual age. The casualness was gone. The humans no longer pretended to be relaxed. They knew what was coming. The fleet emerged from jump space near the Draken homeworld. Thousands of coalition ships faced an even larger Draken defense fleet. The battle that followed was the largest in coalition history. Captain Sunwoo led the human special operations team. Their mission was to penetrate the Draken command center and disable their coordination network. Intelligence said the mission had a 10% chance of success. Sunwoo accepted without hesitation. Thalox watched the battle unfold from the command ship. The space combat was brutal. Ships on both sides exploded in brilliant flashes, but slowly the coalition pushed forward. The way to the planet opened. Begin ground assault, Admiral Vexthar ordered. Dropships fell toward the planet like rain. Thalox rode with G1's battalion. The ship shook from anti-aircraft fire. Around them, other dropships exploded. But their ship made it through, slamming into the ground hard enough to rattle Thalox's teeth. The ramp dropped and they charged into hell. The Draken had fortified every inch of their homeworld. Defensive positions covered the landscape. Automated weapons fired continuously. The coalition forces pushed forward, taking horrific casualties. By the second day, the offensive stalled. The Draken defense was too strong. Coalition forces were being destroyed faster than they could advance. Admiral Vexthar's voice came through all command channels. All units, this is Coalition Command. The offensive has failed. Begin general retreat. I repeat, begin general retreat. Thalox felt relief mixed with shame. They had failed, but at least the survivors could escape. He turned to relay the order to G1. She was listening to her command channel, her face expressionless. Then she switched channels. All human units, this is Colonel G1. I have received the retreat order, acknowledge. Acknowledged, came the responses from across the battlefield. Understood. Continue the advance, Thalox stared at her. Colonel, command ordered a retreat. I acknowledge the order, Commander. But we are going to continue anyway. That is insubordination. G1 looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. Not determination, not courage, something colder. Something absolute, yes sir, it is. But we came here to end this war. We are not leaving until that is done. You will all be killed. Probably. But if we leave now, we will have to come back later. More people will die then. Better to finish it now. Thalox watched helplessly as the human forces ignored the retreat order. 1,200 human soldiers, unsupported, continued advancing into the Draken defenses. He activated his communication to Coalition Command. This is Commander Thalox. The human forces are not retreating. I cannot stop them. Then they will die. Admiral Vexthar said. We cannot support them, I know. But I am staying with them. Someone should witness this. Thalox moved forward with G1's command unit. Around them, the battle raged. But something strange was happening. The other coalition forces, seeing the humans continue, began to hesitate. Some units stopped retreating. A few turned around and advanced again. What are they doing? Fexthar demanded over the command channel. "They are following the humans," Thalox replied. The offensive resumed, driven by humanity's refusal to stop. The humans pushed deeper into Draken territory, and other species followed their example. Sun Wu's special operations team reached the Draken command center. Intelligence had said they would need 20 soldiers. Sun Wu had 6 left. They breached the center anyway, fighting through corridors that were designed to be impenetrable. Private Yuna, the youngest soldier in the battalion, held a rearguard position while her squad advanced. She was alone when the Draken counterattack hit. Thalox watched her combat feed. She fought for 2 hours by herself, killing or disabling dozens of enemies. When her weapon broke, she used theirs. When she ran out of ammunition entirely, she used her hands. She died at her post, but her squad completed their objective because she had bought them time. Minho coordinated artillery strikes despite losing both legs to an explosion. He refused medical evacuation. "I can still work a radio," he said. "Get me a better position and some painkillers." They moved him to a higher vantage point and he continued calling in strikes, his voice steady even though his body was broken. Diane led the engineering corps, clearing paths through minefields. She worked for 18 hours straight without rest. When a mine detonated near her, taking her left arm, she continued working. She bled out while cutting a path through the last minefield, dying with her remaining hand on the detonator. Jiwan fought at the front of every advance. She took 3 shots that should have been fatal. She kept fighting. Thalox saw her get knocked down by an explosion, struggled to her feet, and charge forward again. Her helmet display showed critical damage warnings. She ignored them all. For 6 days, the humans fought without pause. They suffered 90% casualties. Every single human unit remained combat effective. They never broke. They never retreated. They simply continued forward, 1 bloody meter at a time. Sun Wu's team reached the core of the command center. Only Sun Wu and 1 other soldier remained alive. They destroyed the coordination network and transmitted the success signal. Then the Draken killed them. But the damage was done. The Draken defense network collapsed. Without coordination, their forces fell into chaos. The coalition forces, inspired by humanity's example, pushed forward with renewed strength. The Draken lines broke. The offensive succeeded. On the 7th day, the Draken swarm surrendered. Thalox stood in the ruins of the battlefield looking at the cost. The human battalion had taken 95% casualties. Of 1,200 soldiers, 63 survived. But they had won. Jiwan was alive, barely. She had 19 separate injuries, any one of which could have been fatal. She lay on a medical transport, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. Thalox sat beside her. "Colonel, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slightly. "Did we win?" "Yes, the Draken surrendered." She nodded weakly. "Good, worth it then. I don't understand. How did you do this?" Jiwan was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "We're terrified, Commander. All the time. Every battle. Every fight. We are so scared we can barely breathe. But fear has never been enough to stop us. We learned that a long time ago on Earth. Being afraid just means you are still alive. So we keep going." She closed her eyes again, too exhausted to continue. Thalox sat there, finally understanding. The humans did not have superior tactics. They did not have special abilities. They had weaponized something the galaxy had never seen used this way. They had made persistence itself into a weapon. They had turned their stubborn refusal to quit into a force that could not be stopped. Not by pain, not by casualties, not by fear, not by impossible odds. Other species fought until it was logical to stop. Humans fought until they physically could not continue, and sometimes they fought past even that point. Thalox pulled up his new report on humanity. He had been working on it for months, trying to understand what he had witnessed. Now he finally knew what to write. Humanity does not possess superior combat power. They possess something far more terrifying. They have made persistence itself into a weapon. They cannot be defeated because they refuse to accept defeat. They will fight past the point where they should die, past the point where victory seems impossible, past the point where any rational being would stop. This is not a tactic. This is not a strategy. This is their nature, and it is the most powerful force I have ever encountered in warfare. 6 months after the Draken War ended, General Jiwan stood before the Coalition Elder Council. She wore her dress uniform, decorated with medals she had not asked for. Her body had healed mostly. The doctor said she would always walk with a slight limp. She considered that a small price. The council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from every coalition species. Today it was full. They were here to discuss the future of coalition military doctrine. Commander Thalok sat in the advisory section. He was no longer just an instructor. Coalition Command had appointed him to lead the new Xeno-Human Combat Studies Institute. His 3-century career studying warfare had led to this moment. Elder Kresh, the council leader, spoke first. Commander Thalox, you have submitted a comprehensive report on human combat capabilities. Please present your findings. Thalox stood and activated the display. Data appeared showing human performance across dozens of engagements. Honored elders, 1 year ago I believed I understood combat in all its forms. I was wrong. Humanity has shown us something we never knew existed. He brought up comparative statistics. Human strength, speed, and durability compared to other species. The numbers were average at best. By every physical measure, humans are unremarkable. They possess no special abilities. Their technology is standard. Yet they have achieved victory in situations where other forces failed. The question is why? Thalox changed the display to show combat footage from the Draken homeworld. The council watched silently as human soldiers fought past injuries that should have been fatal. The answer lies not in their physical capabilities, but in their psychology. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on their homeworld. They tracked prey for days without rest, pursuing animals faster and stronger than themselves until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. More data appeared, showing human neurochemistry during combat. Human bodies can suppress pain signals and continue functioning past normal biological limits. Their adrenal systems allow sustained combat performance that would kill other species. But most importantly, humans can consciously choose to override their survival instincts. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Several exchanged concerned glances. All species fight with instinct, Thalox continued. When survival instinct says retreat, we retreat. When instinct says we cannot continue, we stop. This is logical. This is how military doctrine works across the galaxy. But humans fight despite their instincts. They can choose to continue when every signal in their body says stop. Elder Kresh spoke. Commander, you are saying humans can ignore the basic drive for self-preservation? Not ignore, Elder, override. They feel fear the same as any species. But they have learned to function despite that fear. They taught themselves to keep moving when their bodies scream for rest. This is not genetic. This is learned, and it makes them the most dangerous soldiers in the galaxy. Thalox brought up casualty statistics from the Draken War. The numbers were shocking. Human units had the highest casualty rates of any coalition forces. They also had the highest mission success rates. Every human combat doctrine assumes soldiers will continue fighting past the point where others would stop. Their tactics are built on the foundation of persistence. They do not plan for acceptable casualties. They plan for mission completion, whatever the cost. Colonel Minho stood from the human delegation section. He had recovered from his injuries, though he now used a prosthetic leg. If I may add something, Commander? Please. What Commander Thalox describes is accurate, but I want to clarify something important. We are not fearless. We are not invincible. We break the same as anyone else. But on Earth we learned something important. Giving up does not stop the fear. Running does not make you safe. So we might as well keep going. At least then we have a chance to change the outcome. The council was silent. Then Elder Kresh spoke again. This is disturbing. You are describing a species that will fight to extinction rather than retreat. Not quite, G1 said, standing. We will fight to the edge of extinction, Elder. But we know where that edge is. We stop when the mission is complete or when continuing would accomplish nothing. We are not suicidal. We are just very, very stubborn. She smiled slightly, and several council members actually laughed. Over the next weeks, the council reviewed Thalox's complete findings. The Institute had studied every aspect of human combat psychology. The results changed everything. Coalition military academies began revising their entire curriculum. Colonel Minho became the most requested instructor in the coalition. His classes did not teach tactics. They taught mental endurance. War is not about who is strongest, Minho told his classes. It is about who refuses to stop. Your bodies are stronger than mine. Your weapons are better. Your armor is thicker. None of that matters if you quit before I do. The human training method spread throughout coalition forces. Not every species could match human persistence. But they learned the principle. Keep going. Do not stop. One more step. One more minute. One more try. Lieutenant Borum represented the new generation of human officers. She watched the older cadets train alongside aliens who had once dismissed humans as weak. Now those same aliens pushed themselves past their previous limits, trying to match human endurance. Thalox observed from the academy overlook, the same position where he had first watched Jiwan arrive. So much had changed in 2 years. Jiwan joined him at the railing. Strange view, isn't it? Very. I stood here 2 years ago and thought I understood everything. I was certain of my assessments. You were not wrong, Commander. We are average. Physically, mentally, we are nothing special. That is what disturbs me most, General. You are average in every measure except one, and that one factor changed everything. They watched a mixed species unit running endurance drills. The Kreeth, normally dominant in physical contests, was struggling to keep pace with a human cadet. The Kreeth refused to give up, pushing harder than Thalox had ever seen one of their kind push. They are learning, Jiwan said, not to be human, but to use what we showed them. Persistence as a weapon. Is the galaxy ready for that? Probably not. But it is better than the alternative. Thalox had to agree. The Draken War proved that threats existed in the galaxy that required more than traditional military strength. They required the ability to continue when continuing seemed impossible. The Coalition Elder Council officially adopted human endurance doctrine as standard military training. The new doctrine spread to every Coalition world. Military academies across the galaxy now taught what Thalox had learned the hard way. Combat is not about superior strength. It is not about better tactics. It is about who refuses to stop. Thalox completed his final report for the Institute. The document was thousands of pages long, covering every aspect of human combat psychology. But the conclusion was simple. I spent 3 centuries studying warfare. I learned tactics from 47 species. I thought I understood combat in all its forms. Then humans arrived and showed me I understood nothing. Combat is not what I thought it was. It is not about victory or defeat. It is not about strength or skill. Combat is about will, and no species in the galaxy has will like humanity. He filed the report and sat back in his chair. The Academy motto visible through his window had been changed. It used to read strength through unity. Now it read beyond breaking. Thalox thought about the past 2 years. He thought about Jiwan holding impossible positions, Minho fighting with broken legs, Tian repairing equipment while bleeding out, Yuna fighting alone for 2 hours, all the humans who had shown him what true persistence meant. He had trained warriors for 3 centuries. He had seen every form of combat, but he had never seen anything like humanity. They were not stronger. They were not faster. They possessed no special powers. They were just average soldiers who had learned one simple truth. Giving up is always an option. But it is never the only option, and that made them unstoppable. Thalox looked out at the training grounds one more time. Human and alien cadets ran together, pushing each other to greater heights. They were building something new. A military force that combined the physical advantages of different species with the mental persistence of humanity. The galaxy would never be the same. And Thalox, who had spent 3 centuries thinking he understood combat, finally admitted the truth. He had been wrong. But he had learned, and sometimes, learning you were wrong is the greatest victory of all. Jiwan found him in his office later that day. Commander, we are having a ceremony for the soldiers lost in the Draken War. Will you attend? Of course, General. They walked together to the Memorial Plaza. Names of the fallen covered the walls. Thalox saw so many human names among them. Yuna, Daeun, Sunwoo, hundreds of others. Do you regret it? Thalox asked quietly. All those lives. Jiwan looked at the names for a long moment. Every single day. But I would make the same choices again. They knew what they were doing. They chose to keep going. We all did. That is what I will never fully understand. How you make that choice, Jiwan smiled sadly. It is simple, Commander. We just decide that giving up is not acceptable. Everything else follows from that. The ceremony began. They honored the dead and celebrated the victory their sacrifice had achieved. Thalox stood with the humans, finally understanding his place among them. He was not human.